Good evening. Tonight you will journey smoothly through a world where the earth breathes, where mountains guard secrets of dormant fire, where the ancestral heat of the planet's formation still pulses quietly beneath your feet. You need not fear. There is no danger here, only contemplation. Only the silent beauty of forces that shaped continents, created islands, fertilized valleys, and offered life its first cradle. You are safe, comfortable, merely observing. And as you breathe slowly, something within you recognizes this deep connection to the Earth's core, to the warmth that sustains existence, to the geological patience that transforms ashes into forests. Close your eyes if you wish. Let the words guide you, like a warm breeze rising from dormant craters, carrying the aroma of ancient minerals and the promise of eternal renewal. Volcanoes are not monsters, they are portals, open windows to the planet's interior, living reminders that the Earth is not a dead stone, but a dynamic organism, full of energy, movement, and transformation. You can imagine them now, not in violent eruption, but in serene repose. Imagine snow-capped mountains whose heart holds a lake of lava that has slept for centuries. Imagine tropical islands where black beaches gleam in the sun, created by the patient meeting of fire and ocean. Imagine verdant fields so fertile that they feed entire civilizations, nourished by ashes that once fell gently from the sky like dark, fragrant snow. The story of volcanoes is the story of the Earth's generosity. And today, you will discover why these mountains of fire are, in fact, sources of life, beauty, and profound tranquility. You take a deep breath. The air around you seems to contain something ancient, something that existed before the first forests, before the first oceans took the shape we know. It is the breath of the primordial earth, and you are about to understand that this breath is not frightening, but comforting, like the warmth of a fireplace on a cold night, like the steam rising from a cup of tea, like the feeling of belonging to something much larger than yourself. Billions of years ago, when the planet was still young and fiery, the entire surface seethed. There were no solid continents, only oceans of molten rock, incandescent seas that glowed red-orange under a sky without visible stars, so dense was the vapor and the clouds of gas. You can close your eyes and try to feel that time, not with fear, but with curiosity. It was a world without life yet, but full of potential. And the first volcanoes, if we can call them that, were simply the very surface of the planet, constantly boiling, releasing gases, vapors, chemical elements that would later form the atmosphere, the oceans, the conditions for life to arise. Volcanism was not the end of anything, it was the beginning of everything. You observe, mentally, how the Earth's crust began to cool, slowly, patiently, over millions of years. Solid plates formed, floating on the still, hot, and viscous mantle. And when these plates moved, collided, separated, volcanoes were born there, not by chance, but out of necessity. The Earth needed to release its internal heat, needed to expel trapped gases, needed to recycle materials, return to the surface what had sunk, mix elements, create new lands. Volcanoes are the planet's escape valve, and without them, the Earth would be different, perhaps uninhabitable, certainly less beautiful. Breathe once more. Feel how the air enters fresh into your lungs and exits warm. Your body also releases heat, also regulates temperatures. You are, on a tiny scale, a thermodynamic system, just like the Earth, and there is something comforting in that. Knowing that you and the planet share this need for balance, this dance between retaining and releasing, between heating and cooling. Volcanoes are not anomalies, they are part of the world's metabolism. And when you understand that, when you accept that, something in you relaxes, because you realize that everything is working exactly as it should. Now you travel to an island, a small island lost in the Pacific, covered in lush vegetation. Palm trees sway gently in the wind. Waves lap beaches of black sand, fine as dust, soft as silk. Birds sing melodies that have never been written on sheet music. And in the center of the island, a mountain, not very tall, but imposing. Its summit is flat, and there, hidden among giant ferns and damp moss, lies a crater. Inside it, a lake. Not of ordinary water, but of water heated by deep geothermal springs. Steam rises slowly, forming low clouds that dance around the edge of the crater. You approach. There is no danger, only curiosity and peace. The water is a luminous turquoise green, the result of dissolved minerals that came from the depths. The air smells of sulfur, but not unpleasantly. It's an earthy, primordial smell, reminiscent of smell of wet clay, hot stones after the rain. You touch the water with your fingertips. It's warm, but not scalding. Perfect temperature, as if the earth knew exactly what you needed at that moment. And as your hand remains there, immersed in that ancestral warmth, you understand something fundamental. Volcanoes create. They don't just destroy. They create islands where there was only ocean before. They create soil where there was only barren rock. They create hot springs where life flourishes in impossible forms. Colorful bacteria, orange, yellow, green, live on the edges of these hot springs, feeding on chemical compounds that would be toxic to other beings. They exist because volcanoes exist. And you exist, ultimately, because billions of years ago, volcanoes released the water vapor that formed the first oceans. The Earth has approximately 1,500 active volcanoes. The word active may sound alarming, but it shouldn't. Active simply means that eruptions have occurred in the last 10,000 years, and 10,000 years on a geological scale is less than the blink of an eye. Most of these volcanoes are sleeping, deeply, quietly, like an animal hibernating during a long winter, conserving energy, waiting for the right moment. And some will never wake up again. They will become extinct, gradually, as the internal heat that fed them dissipates, as the tectonic plates move and leave behind the sources of magma that created them. You walk now, mentally, through a field of solidified lava. It's not uniform, it's not smooth. It's a frozen sea of black and rough waves, some shiny like glass, others opaque like coal. There are two main types of this cooled lava. The first is called pahoho, a Hawaiian word that means something like smooth stone. When the lava is fluid, hot, rich in certain minerals, it flows slowly, forming surfaces that resemble coiled ropes, petrified eddies, solidified rivers with an almost organic texture. You could walk barefoot on pahoho in some stretches if it were completely cold. It would be like walking on a giant abstract sculpture, created not by human hands, but by time, by temperature, by chemistry. The second type is a'a, also from Hawaiian, which can be translated as rough stone. When the lava cools more quickly, or when it loses gases during the flow, it fragments, forming an irregular, pointed surface full of sharp edges. Walking on a'a would be difficult, but there's beauty in that too. Each fragment has a unique shape. Each angle reflects light differently. And over time, with the rain, with the wind, even awe softens. Mosses grow in its cracks. Lichens paint its surfaces green, yellow, orange. Seeds brought by birds find small pockets of dust and germinate. And decades later, that landscape that seemed barren is covered with ferns, bushes, young trees. The volcano didn't kill, it prepared the ground, cleared the space, offered fresh minerals, and life accepted the invitation. There is an entire island in the Pacific that was born less than 70 years ago. You can look for it on maps, although it may be too small to appear on some. It emerged from the ocean in 1963 when an underwater eruption raised so much material that it broke the surface of the water. Smoke and steam rose in huge columns. Ashes fell around, gradually forming a solid mass. And when the eruption ceased, there was a new island. Without a name yet, without life, just black, irregular, smoking rock. Scientists named it and began to observe, and what they saw was a miracle of colonization. First came the seabirds, looking for a place to rest during migration. They landed briefly, left excrement that contained nutrients and undigested seeds. Then came the winds, bringing spores of fungi, pollen, flying seeds. The waves deposited algae on the beaches, which rotted and enriched the rudimentary soil. And in a few years, vegetation began to appear. Pioneer mosses, hardy grasses, then bushes, and then insects, spiders, birds that built nests. The island was alive, created by fire, colonized by life. And you realize, contemplating this, that the volcano was not an obstacle. It was a gateway. It was a beginning. Volcanic soil is one of the most fertile in the world. It seems paradoxical. How can something born of fire nurture life? But the answer lies in chemistry. Volcanic ash is rich in minerals essential for plants: potassium, phosphorus, magnesium, calcium, iron. When lava slowly decomposes over years, it releases these elements gradually, creating dark, loose soil that retains moisture without soaking, that drains without drying out. Farmers know this. For thousands of years, civilizations have chosen to live on the slopes of volcanoes, not despite the danger, but because of the fertility. And man, as those civilizations thrived. They cultivated vineyards that produced exceptional wines. They planted coffee plantations that yielded beans of unique flavor. They harvested fruits larger, sweeter, more abundant than anywhere else. You imagine now a vineyard. Not just any vineyard, but a specific one, situated on the slope of a dormant volcano in Italy. The vines are old, some decades old, trunks twisted like the hands of elders. The roots plunge deep into the volcanic soil, traversing layers of ash, reaching water and minerals that other plants would never touch. And the grapes that grow there absorb something of the terrain. They absorb the geological history. They absorb the iron, the potassium, the memory of fire. And when these grapes are harvested, pressed, fermented, the resulting wine has a unique character. It has mineral notes that cannot be replicated in other soils. It has depth, complexity, a flavor that evokes stone, earth, time. The volcano is in the wine, and when someone drinks that wine, they are, in a poetic way, tasting the interior of the earth. Breathe again. Feel the weight of your body sinking comfortably where you are. There is no rush. There is no place to go. Just this gentle journey through the calm wonders of volcanoes. And now, you discover something extraordinary. Volcanoes sing. It's not a metaphor, it's literal. When magma moves in the depths, when gases escape through cracks, when rocks adjust under pressure, they produce sounds. Infrasound, frequencies so low that the human ear cannot detect them, but that scientific instruments capture. And also audible sounds. There are volcanoes that emit constant humming, as if they were meditating. Others produce sharp whistles when steam escapes through narrow openings. Some generate deep, rumbling booms, reminiscent of distant drums. And scientists have begun to record these sounds, study them, interpret them. Because each sound tells a story. It reveals what is happening in the depths. And curiously, some of these sounds, when accelerated or decelerated digitally, resemble music, accidental melodies, geological harmonies, as if the Earth were composing symphonies that no one asked for, but that exist nonetheless, beautiful, abstract, eternal. You listen, in your imagination, to the murmur of an Icelandic volcano. It is a deep, continuous sound, like the distant purr of some gentle, gentle animal. There is no threat in it, just presence. Just the affirmation that something immense and ancient is alive there, breathing slowly, moving on timescales that make a human life almost imperceptible. And there is peace in that, knowing that some things operate outside of our speed, outside of our agitation. The volcano is not in a hurry. The volcano is not stressed. The volcano simply is. There are many more underwater volcanoes than terrestrial ones. It is estimated that there are more than 1 million of them on the ocean floor, most never seen by human eyes, never completely mapped. They form entire mountain ranges on the seabed, chains of mountains that stretch for thousands of kilometers, longer than the Andes or the Himalayas. And in these places, where the icy water of the deep ocean meets the heat of the emerging magma, oases of life arise. Biological communities that do not depend on sunlight, that do not need photosynthesis, but that feed on the chemical energy released by the volcanoes. These are hydrothermal vents, black or white chimneys, depending on the minerals they deposit, spewing superheated water, over 300 degrees Celsius, which does not boil only because the pressure of the depths is immense. And around these vents, life. Giant white and red tube worms, which can reach meters in length, without a mouth, without a stomach, harboring symbiotic bacteria in their bodies that transform chemical compounds into energy. Albino crabs, blind shrimp, fish that have never seen light. And all depend on the volcano. They depend on the heat, the minerals, the gases it expels. Without underwater volcanoes, these life forms would not exist. And when scientists discovered these communities in the 70s, they realized something profound. Life is more resilient, more creative, more versatile than they imagined. If life can thrive in absolute darkness, under crushing pressure, fueled only by volcanic chemistry, where else can it exist? Perhaps on distant moons, with underground oceans heated by tectonic activity. Perhaps on planets we will never see. The volcano has expanded our understanding of the possible. You float now, in a state of deep relaxation, imagining yourself in a submersible, descending slowly through the dark waters of the Pacific. There is no natural light here. Only the occasional bioluminescence of passing creatures, small points of blue or green light that flash and disappear. And then you see, below, glowing softly, a crack in the rock of the ocean floor. And from that crack, dark water, cold, rich in dissolved minerals, rises in undulating plumes. It looks like underwater smoke. And all around, life, so much life. Mussels clustered in colonies, their shells covered in white bacteria, anemones swaying in the thermal current, octopuses sneaking among rocks. And you understand, this is a garden, a volcanic garden, an Eden created not by sunlight, but by the heat of the Earth's core. The temperature of the Earth's core is comparable to the temperature of the sun's surface. About 5,000 degrees Celsius. And all that heat needs to go somewhere. It cannot remain trapped eternally, so it rises, slowly through the mantle, convecting, creating gigantic currents of semi-molten rock that move a few centimeters per year. And when these currents reach the crust, when they find weak points, cracks, plate boundaries, there the magma emerges, and a volcano is born, or awakens, or simply continues its silent work of recycling the planet, of releasing pressure, of keeping the thermodynamic system in equilibrium. Magma is not uniform. There are different types, each with a specific chemical composition, characteristic temperature, particular viscosity. Basaltic magma, poor in silica, is fluid, hot, flows easily, creates relatively tranquil eruptions,
forming broad, gentle volcanic shields like those in Hawaii. You can imagine it flowing like hot honey, incandescent, advancing a few meters per hour, allowing people to approach safely, observe, photograph. There is something almost meditative in watching basaltic lava flow. The movement is constant, predictable, hypnotic. It glows red-orange in the night, creates patterns as it cools, builds new land centimeter by centimeter. Rhyolitic magma, rich in silica, is thick, viscous, retains gases. When sufficient pressure builds up, the eruption can be explosive, creating ash clouds, columns that reach the stratosphere. But even these eruptions, when observed from a safe distance, have beauty. The ashes paint the sky in shades of gray, purple, pink. The eruptive column can become so high that a commercial airplane could not cross it. And when it finally settles, when the winds disperse the particles around the world, they create extraordinary sunsets, intense oranges, deep reds, because the particles suspended in the atmosphere scatter light in ways that don't normally happen. There was an eruption in Indonesia in 1815 at Mount Tambora, considered one of the largest of recent centuries. And the ashes it released into the atmosphere circulated the globe, temporarily cooling the climate, creating a summer so cold the following year that it became known as the year without a summer. Crops failed. Snows fell in June in temperate regions, and artists noticed something strange and wonderful. The sunsets were spectacular, vibrant, unreal. And some painters, influenced by these intense colors, created works that captured this accidental beauty. The volcano had become a brush, tinting the sky of the world, altering nature's palette, inspiring art. Destruction? Perhaps, but also creation, always creation. You feel a gentle drowsiness starting to take over. Your thoughts become slower, looser, and you let the narrative lull you like a warm wave, like a heavy, soft blanket. Let's continue the journey, but now with an even smoother, even more contemplative rhythm. Pumice stones float. It seems impossible. Stone should sink. But pumice, formed when lava full of gases cools rapidly, is so porous, so full of tiny bubbles, that its density is less than that of water. And after volcanic eruptions near the ocean, floating islands of pumice can form, natural rafts that drift with the currents for thousands of kilometers. And as they drift, they become carriers of life. Algae attach to their surfaces, young mollusks cling on, fish eggs attach to their cracks. And when these rafts finally run aground on distant beaches, they release passengers, species that would never have reached that coast. The volcano not only created land, it created ships. It created accidental migratory routes. It created biodiversity. There is a type of volcano that is especially tranquil, especially beautiful: mud volcanoes. They do not expel molten rock, but cold mud mixed with gases. They are small, rarely taller than a house, and their eruptions are gentle, almost comical. The mud forms bubbles that grow slowly and then burst with a soft plop, launching splashes that fall around like thick drops of gray rain. And this mud, rich in minerals, is used by some communities for therapeutic purposes: volcanic mud baths, topical applications, treatments that date back to ancient cultures. There is something comforting in covering the skin with warm mud, feeling its texture, its weight, its gentle warmth. It's like embracing the earth. How to be embraced by her. Imagine now being in one of these mud springs, not in violent eruption, but in tranquil effervescence. The mud is warm, pleasant. You dip your hands in, feel the silky texture, the fine granules sliding between your fingers. The smell is earthy, mineral, not unpleasant. And you allow yourself to relax completely, letting the mud support some of your weight, letting the geothermal heat penetrate your skin, relax your muscles, calm your mind. There is no rush, there is no danger, just this moment of connection with something primordial, something that existed before you and will exist after, but that now, in this instant, offers comfort. Volcanoes created the atmosphere you breathe. In the early days of Earth, there was no free oxygen in the air. The primitive atmosphere was composed mainly of water vapor, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, all expelled by volcanoes during billions of years of intense activity. And when the temperature dropped low enough, the vapor condensed, forming the first oceans. And in those oceans, enriched by volcanic minerals, the first forms of life emerged. Simple, single-celled organisms that eventually learned to photosynthesize, to transform sunlight and carbon dioxide into oxygen. And over eons, oxygen accumulated, allowing more complex life forms to evolve, allowing you, eventually, to exist, breathing air created, ultimately, by volcanoes. Every breath you take is a gift of primordial volcanism, and there is poetic beauty in that. You are not separate from the earth. You are part of it. Your body contains calcium that may have been millions of years ago in some volcanic rock. It contains iron that may have been expelled by some underwater eruption.
You are made of stardust, yes, but also of volcanic ash, of terrestrial minerals, of water that circulated through geothermal springs. You are Earth as much as you are consciousness, and recognizing this brings deep peace. There is a region in Iceland called Landmannalaugar where volcanic mountains have been painted by geology itself. This is not an exaggeration. The slopes are striped in impossible colors: pink, yellow, green, purple, orange. Each color indicates the presence of a different mineral, deposited by volcanic and hydrothermal activity over millennia. Pink comes from rhyolite, yellow from sulfur, green from copper-containing minerals. It is as if a giant artist has worked slowly, layer by layer, creating a landscape that seems more suited to a dream than reality. And when you walk through these mountains, when you feel the colored volcanic sand crunching under your feet, when you see the fumaroles releasing steam against the blue sky, you understand that the Earth is an artist, and volcanoes are its brushes. There are natural hot springs in various parts of the world, all heated by volcanism. And bathers who immerse themselves in these waters report a feeling of deep relaxation, not only physical, but mental. The ideal temperature, around 40 degrees Celsius, 104 Fahrenheit, relaxes tense muscles. The minerals dissolved in the water, magnesium, calcium, silica, are absorbed by the skin, offering therapeutic benefits. But there's something more, something intangible. Perhaps it is the knowledge that this water comes from the depths, that it has been heated by heat that has existed since the formation of the planet, that you, in a very real way, connecting with the Earth's core through this warm mineral water. And your nervous system recognizes this and responds with relaxation, with gratitude, with peace. Iceland, an entire island born of volcanism, is situated exactly on the boundary of two tectonic plates that are slowly moving apart. Each year, America separates from Europe by a few centimeters. And in this space that opens up, magma rises, fills the gap, creates new land. Iceland is growing, slowly, imperceptibly, but constantly. And Icelanders live with this awareness. They have built a culture around volcanoes. They use geothermal energy to heat homes, generate electricity, grow food in greenhouses, even during the Arctic winter. They do not fear volcanoes. They respect, understand, coexist. And there is a lesson in that. A lesson about acceptance, about adaptation, about recognizing that forces greater than us exist, and that we can choose to live in harmony with them instead of in opposition. You feel increasingly relaxed. Your breathing is deep, regular,
your limbs weigh comfortably. And you continue the inner journey, exploring not only volcanoes, but what they represent: transformation, renewal, patience, power that does not need to be aggressive to be real. When a volcano erupts, it is not because it is angry. It has no emotions. It is simply a response to physical conditions. Accumulated pressure, magma that has found a way, gases that need to escape. It's a process, not an intention, and there is wisdom in understanding that. Many things in nature operate this way, without malice, without conscious purpose, just following physical, chemical, thermodynamic laws. And accepting this can free you from a lot of unnecessary fear. The universe is not against you. It's just being the universe. And you can find your place in it, observe, learn, appreciate. Volcanic ash, when it falls, may seem like the end, but it's a beginning. In a few years, vegetation colonizes the ash deposits. In decades, forests emerge. In centuries, civilizations flourish. Pompeii, the Roman city covered by the ashes of Vesuvius in 79 AD, seemed like an absolute tragedy. And it was for those who lived there. But the ashes also preserved the city perfectly, creating a time capsule that allows us to understand how Romans lived, worked, loved, laughed. The ashes destroyed and immortalized at the same time. And in the fields around Vesuvius today, tomatoes considered among the best in the world grow, grapes that produce celebrated wines, all benefited by the fertile soil created by those same ashes. Transformation is not just destruction, it is also the creation of space for the new. And volcanoes teach this constantly. Barren lava field becomes forest, ash becomes soil, heat becomes energy, gases become atmosphere. Everything is cyclical. Everything is transformation. You think now of dormant volcanoes. How many are scattered around the world, silent for centuries or millennia, covered in vegetation, inhabited by animals, climbed by tourists who may not even know they are standing on a sleeping giant? And there's something moving about that. These giants that once roared now rest, peaceful, offering only their shape, their presence, their slopes for life to flourish. They are not extinct, just sleeping. And maybe they'll never wake up. Maybe their magma sources have moved, leaving them behind as monuments of a previous era. And that's okay. There is dignity in rest. There is beauty in silence. The dormant volcano is not a failure. It is a witness. It is a living reminder that change is constant and that everything, eventually, finds its peace. Mount Fuji in Japan is a dormant volcano. Its last eruption occurred in 1707, and during these centuries of silence, it has become a national symbol, a spiritual icon, an inspiration for countless artists, poets, pilgrims. Its perfect conical shape, crowned with snow during much of the year, is instantly recognized around the world. And people climb its slopes not with fear, but with reverence. They seek spiritual connection, they seek personal challenge, they seek beauty. And Fuji offers all this, silently, patiently, like a master who doesn't need to speak to teach. You imagine now being at the base of Fuji at dawn. The air is fresh, almost cold. Mist covers the valleys around, but the volcano's peak emerges above it, bathed in the first rays of sun, shining golden against a deep blue sky. Birds begin to sing. Leaves of nearby trees tremble gently in the morning breeze. And you feel gratitude. You don't quite know why. Maybe for existing, for being able to witness this beauty, for being part, even a tiny part, of this planet that creates mountains and then adorns them with forests, that heats waters in the depths and allows life to thrive, that transforms rock into soil and soil into garden. There are volcanoes on other planets. Mars has Olympus Mons, the largest known volcano in the solar system. so large that its base could cover the entire state of Missouri, so tall that its summit would reach almost 3 times the height of Mount Everest. It is extinct now, silenced by the loss of Martian geological activity. But one day, billions of years ago, it erupted. It launched lava that flowed for hundreds of kilometers. It created plateaus, plains, landscapes that still exist, frozen in time, waiting for some future explorer to witness them directly. And there is something poetic in knowing that processes we see on Earth, that we study, that you now contemplate, happened on other worlds. Volcanism is not a terrestrial peculiarity. It is a characteristic of rocky planets that retain internal heat. It is universal. It is common, and this connects Earth to the cosmos in an intimate way. Io, a moon of Jupiter, is the most volcanically active body in the solar system. Hundreds of volcanoes erupt constantly on its surface, launching plumes of sulfur that reach hundreds of kilometers in height. And all this happens not because Io has residual heat from its formation, but because the gravitational forces of Jupiter and the other Galilean moons constantly stretch and compress it, generating heating by internal friction. Io is kneaded, literally, like Play-Doh between invisible hands. And this constant gravitational torture keeps it melted inside, erupting on the outside. It is a hellish landscape, no doubt. But it is also a natural laboratory where volcanic processes occur under extreme conditions, teaching scientists about physics, chemistry, planetary dynamics. Even in its distant violence, Io contributes for human knowledge. But you don't need to go to Mars or the moons of Jupiter. You can simply close your eyes where you are and feel the connection. The warmth of your body is a distant echo of the heat of the Earth's core. The beating of your heart recalls, in a different rhythm, the pulsations of magma in the underground chambers. You breathe, the volcano breathes. You transform energy, the volcano transforms energy. You are a dynamic system, it is a dynamic system. And both are part of something bigger, of a planet that spins, that orbits, that exists in a delicate balance between immense forces. Geologists describe certain types of volcanoes as effusive rather than explosive. The word effusive has an almost emotional connotation. Effusive means outpouring, generosity, abundance. And effusive volcanoes really seem generous. They don't explode, they constantly pour out lava, creating incandescent rivers that can flow for weeks, months, years. Kilauea in Hawaii had a continuous eruption between 1983 and 2018, 35 years of constant outpouring. And during that time, it created square miles of new land, expanded the island, offered territory for future forests, future ecosystems. It was possible to visit Kilauea during its eruption, observe the lava from a safe distance, walk on newly solidified flows, feel the heat radiating through the soles of your boots. And tourists did that, not with terror, but with admiration. Because witnessing the creation of land is a spiritual, transformative experience that puts human life into perspective. You allow yourself now to slide more deeply into relaxation. Your thoughts become loose images, fragments of sensations. Red-orange lava glowing in the darkness, green fern growing in a crater, turquoise blue of a crater lake, gray ash falling softly like snow. All these tones mix in a soft kaleidoscope behind your closed eyelids, and you are no longer just hearing about volcanoes, you are feeling their essence. Their geological patience, their serene power. Volcanic rocks have been used by humans since time immemorial. Obsidian, volcanic glass, formed when silica-rich lava cools so quickly that there's no time for crystals to form, was transformed into tools, arrowheads, knives. Its edges could be chipped to be sharper than modern steel. Surgeons today, in certain delicate procedures, prefer obsidian scalpels to metal scalpels because the cut is cleaner, more precise, heals better. The volcano provided technology to humanity before the word technology even existed. Basalt, the most common volcanic rock, was used to build temples, statues, roads. The Appian Way, one of the oldest and most important Roman roads, was partially paved with basalt stones.
And 2,000 years later, sections of this road still exist, can still be traveled on foot. The basalt lasted, resisted time, weather, the traffic of millions of steps. Because volcanic rock, born in extreme temperatures, forged under immense pressure, is resilient, it's durable, it is reliable. And you think about resilience, about how volcanoes are archetypes of transformation and resistance. They explode, disintegrate, lose height, are eroded by thousands of years of rain and wind. And then, if the conditions are right, they are reborn. They build themselves again, layer by layer, eruption by eruption. Not quickly, but inevitably. And there is a deep lesson in this for anyone who has ever felt that they have been reduced to ashes, that they have lost something fundamental, that they needed to start over. The volcano says you can rebuild, slowly, patiently, adding layer upon layer of experience, learning, growth, and eventually you will be a mountain again. Different perhaps, but still majestic, still standing, still alive. Volcanic eruptions have influenced climate on scales that have affected entire civilizations. There was an eruption in Indonesia in 1257, so massive that its ashes circulated the globe for years, cooling temperatures, causing harsh winters, short summers, reduced harvests. Historians believe that this eruption may have contributed to the end of some societies, to population migrations, to political changes. And there are even larger eruptions in the geological past, super eruptions that launched so much material into the atmosphere that the sky darkened for years, that life was tested to the limit of its endurance. And even so, life persisted, adapted, evolved. The volcano challenged life, and life accepted the challenge and won, always won. Yellowstone National Park in the United States is located on one of the largest supervolcanoes on the planet, a gigantic caldera so large that it cannot be seen from any single point on the ground. Only from an airplane or through geological maps does its extent become clear. And underneath it, a colossal magma chamber, a vast chamber of molten rock containing enough magma to, if it erupted, blanket entire states in ash, alter the global climate for decades. It sounds terrifying, but it shouldn't, because this chamber is constantly monitored. Scientists measure every tremor, every elevation of the ground, every change in the composition of the gases emitted by the fumaroles. And all the evidence indicates that an eruption is not imminent. It may not happen for tens of thousands of years. It may never happen again if the plume of magma that feeds Yellowstone shifts or depletes. And in the meantime, Yellowstone is a stunning park. Geysers that erupt with clockwork regularity, launching columns of boiling water dozens of feet into the air. Hot springs of impossible colors, deep blue, emerald green, vibrant orange, created by thermophilic bacteria that thrive in temperatures that would kill any other life form. Steaming lakes, bubbling mud, landscapes that seem alien, but that are deeply terrestrial, deeply connected to the heat that still pulses at the heart of the planet. Millions of people visit Yellowstone annually. They don't flee the supervolcano. They embrace it, admire it, photograph it, and they leave transformed, touched by the majesty of geological forces that operate on scales that make human lives seem like brief but precious moments. You take another deep breath. The air seems to contain something different now. Maybe it's just your perception that has changed. But it feels like you can sense, very subtly, the distant heat of the Earth's core radiating through the layers of rock,
through the soil, through the air, reaching your skin, reminding you that you are connected, always have been, always will be. There are ancient rituals associated with volcanoes in many cultures. In Hawaii, Madame Pele is the goddess of fire and volcanoes, temperamental but creative, destructive but renewing. Offerings were made to her, songs were sung, dances were performed, not to appease her necessarily, but to honor her, to acknowledge her fundamental role in the existence of the islands, in the fertility of the soil, in the very possibility of life. And even today, even in a scientific age, many Hawaiians maintain a deep respect for volcanoes. Not out of superstition, but out of recognition of something true, that forces greater than humans exist, and that wisdom lies in respecting them, not in trying to dominate them. In New Zealand, the Maori have profound stories about the volcanoes of their land. Mountains are petrified ancestors. Crater lakes are tears of gods. Hot springs are sacred gifts. And there is spiritual guidance on how to behave near these places, what attitudes to take, what respects to offer. And again, it's not mere superstition. It's wisdom encoded in narrative. It's knowledge that certain places have power, that certain phenomena demand care, that humility before nature is not weakness, but intelligence. You feel your eyelids growing heavier. Your consciousness begins to drift gently between wakefulness and sleep, and that's okay. You can let go. You can rest. The narrative will continue to envelop you, even if you fall asleep. The words will become dreams. The volcanoes will become dreamscapes through which you walk, peacefully, exploring craters filled with flowers, touching warm lava that doesn't burn, only gently warms your hands. Geothermal energy is a gift from volcanoes to modern humanity. In places where volcanic activity is close to the surface, groundwater is heated naturally and can be accessed through wells. This hot water can heat homes directly, circulate through pipes under sidewalks to melt snow in winter, supply greenhouses where vegetables grow, even when the outside temperature is below freezing. And if the water is hot enough, it can generate steam that spins turbines and produces clean, renewable, constant electricity. It doesn't depend on sun like solar power. It doesn't depend on wind like wind power. It depends only on the Earth's heat, which has been there for billions of years and will be there for billions more. Iceland generates almost all of its electricity from renewable sources, much of it geothermal. Homes are heated by thermal water brought in by pipes from underground reservoirs. There is no smoke from chimneys in the Icelandic winter. There are no expensive heating bills. The volcano provides, freely, abundantly. And there is poetic beauty in a modern civilization fueled by a primordial force, in city lights shining thanks to the same heat that created the island millions of years ago. You imagine now a small, cozy house somewhere in Iceland. Snow falls outside, covering everything with a silent white blanket. But inside, it's warm, comfortable, and not because wood burns in a fireplace or because an electric heater is working, but because miles below the foundation of the house, water is being heated by rock that remembers the touch of magma. And that water rises, circulates through the radiators, generously distributing its heat throughout the rooms. And you, sitting in a chair near the window, watching the snowflakes dance outside, feel gratitude. The volcano is taking care of you, keeping you warm, keeping you alive. There are black sand beaches in various parts of the world, created by the erosion of basaltic volcanic rocks. The sand isn't opaque black, it's shiny black, as if each grain were a tiny fragment of dark glass. And when the sun shines on these beaches, when waves wash over them, the sand glistens, sparkles, creating a surface that is both dark and luminous. It's strangely beautiful, different from any golden sand beach, more dramatic, more mysterious. And walking barefoot on black sand is a unique sensory experience. It heats up quickly under the sun, more than light sand. It has a different texture, finer, more uniform. And walking barefoot on black sand is a unique sensory experience. And knowing that each grain is a fragment of ancient lava, a piece of mountain disintegrated by time and the sea, adds emotional depth to the simple act of stepping on the beach. There's a black beach in Iceland, Reynisfjara, considered one of the most beautiful in the world. Besides the black sand, there are basalt columns rising from the cliffs, perfect hexagonal formations created when the lava cooled slowly and contracted, fragmenting into geometric patterns that seem artificial, but are completely natural. They look like giant organ pipes. They look like the architecture of a lost civilization. But they are just rock, just basalt, doing what basalt does when all the conditions are right. And tourists walk among these columns, touch their cold surfaces, look up in reverence, whisper so as not to break the sacred silence of the place. The volcano created a cathedral, not for human gods, but for the very mystery of existence. You feel sleep taking over completely now. Your muscles are completely relaxed. Your breathing is deep, slow, almost imperceptible. And your mind floats in a state of semi-consciousness, where thoughts and dreams blend without a clear boundary. And it's all right. You are safe. You are at peace. And the story of the volcanoes continues unfolding gently, lulling you towards total rest. Diamonds can be brought to the surface by volcanoes. Not any volcano, but a specific type called kimberlite, which arises from extreme depths, from zones in the mantle where the pressure is so intense that carbon crystallizes into the hardest form known. And when kimberlite erupts, it brings with it these diamonds, along with other exotic rocks, minerals that would normally never see the light of day. Kimberlite eruptions are rare, rapid, violent, but when they end, they leave behind vertical pipes in the ground, chimneys filled with diamond-rich material. And humans, eventually, discover these pipes and mine the diamonds. Jewelry worn in wedding rings, in king's crowns, in natural history museums, many were brought to the surface by volcanoes millions of years ago. The volcano didn't know it was carrying treasure, it was just doing its job. Just releasing pressure. But in the process, it offered an unexpected gift to humanity. And you think about unexpected gifts, about how life is full of them, about how something that seems ordinary can contain the extraordinary hidden within. The lava that seems like just molten rock contains minerals that will nourish forests. The ash that seems like just gray dust contains elements that will fertilize fields. The steam that seems like just a cloud contains energy that will heat houses. Everything has value. Everything has purpose, even if it's not immediately apparent. Subglacial volcanoes are a particularly fascinating phenomenon. When a volcano erupts under a glacier, the heat of the lava melts the ice, creating rivers of meltwater that flow through tunnels within the ice, carrying ash, creating hybrid landscapes of fire and ice that seem to belong to a fantasy world. And when the eruption finally ends and the ice resettles, strange formations remain. Mountains of unusual shape, with flat tops because the lava was contained and shaped by the surrounding ice. Ice caves colored by mineral deposits. Subglacial rivers that constantly change course. It's an impossible marriage, fire and ice, death and life, heat and cold, coexisting, interacting, creating something new that couldn't exist if there were only one or only the other. In Iceland again, there's a volcano called Eyjafjallajökull, a name almost unpronounceable for non-Icelanders, which erupted in 2010 under a glacier. The eruption wasn't particularly large, it wasn't dangerous for nearby communities, but the ash it produced was launched at the exact altitude to be captured by jet streams,
high-altitude winds that circulate around the planet. And this ash was spread over Europe, disrupting air traffic for days. Millions of people had their flights canceled, not because the ash was dangerous to humans on the ground, but because it could damage airplane engines. And so, for a few days, Europe slowed down. People who were traveling had to stop, wait, and some complained, but others embraced the forced pause. They met strangers in airport terminals.
They had conversations they wouldn't have had. They saw places they didn't plan to see. And perhaps they learned something about accepting what cannot be controlled. The volcano didn't ask for permission. It didn't consult human calendars. It just erupted, as it had to erupt. And the world adjusted. You're almost asleep now, almost completely surrendered to rest. And the words are just distant murmurs, soft waves lapping at a black sand beach inside your mind. And you let go. You let the remaining tension flow out of your body like warm water. You let consciousness dissolve gently. There's comfort in knowing that volcanoes exist.
That even now, as you rest, there's magma flowing slowly beneath continents. There are hot springs bubbling in remote mountains. There are islands being built on the ocean floor, inch by inch, underwater eruption by underwater eruption. The planet is alive. It's working. It's constantly renewing itself. And you are part of it. Your body, at rest, is also renewing itself. Cells being replaced, tissues being repaired, energy being conserved and redistributed. You are a microcosm of the macrocosm, and there's peace in recognizing this connection. The ancient Greek philosophers tried to understand volcanoes. Without modern scientific instruments, without knowledge of plate tectonics or magma, they speculated. Some thought that powerful winds were trapped beneath mountains and eventually escaped with enough force to drag molten rock. Others imagined that there was literal fire burning in underground caves, fueled by unknown combustibles. They were wrong on the details, but right on the fundamental intuition. Something powerful existed beneath the surface, something that occasionally manifested itself. And that intuition led them to respect the Earth, to recognize that they didn't understand everything, that mysteries remained. And there's a healthy humility in that. Even today, with all modern science, there are still unanswered questions about volcanoes. There are still eruptions that surprise scientists. There are still behaviors that cannot be perfectly predicted. The mystery hasn't been eliminated. It's just been redefined. And you appreciate the mystery. You don't need to understand everything. You don't need to control everything. You can simply observe, admire, exist alongside forces that are bigger, older, more patient than you. And there's freedom in that. Freedom to drop the illusion of total control. Freedom to be small in a large universe. Freedom to wonder. There are crater lakes around the world, formed when volcanoes erupt explosively, emptying their magma chambers and collapsing on themselves, creating giant depressions that over time fill with water. Crater Lake in Oregon, United States, is one of the deepest and bluest. Its color is so intense, so pure, that it seems unreal. A deep blue that reflects the sky, but seems to come from some internal source of light. The water is exceptionally clean because there are no rivers feeding the lake, only rain and melted snow. And because it's at high altitude, because it's surrounded by steep walls of volcanic rock, the lake remains pristine, untouched, like a jewel hidden in a stone vault. You imagine being at the edge of Crater Lake on a summer afternoon. The sun is warm on your skin. A gentle breeze carries the scent of pine trees from the surrounding forests. And you look down into that impossible blue, and you feel a dizziness, not of fear, but of beauty. It's too deep to see the bottom. It's too vast to embrace with a single glance. And you understand that you are looking into the heart of an ancient volcano that self-destructed, and in the process, created something more beautiful than anything that existed before. Destruction isn't always the end. Sometimes it's metamorphosis. Volcanic ash is used in beauty products, face masks, scrubs, soaps. The fine texture of the ash gently removes dead skin cells. The minerals nourish. And there's something symbolic in applying volcanic ash to your face, in something that was expelled by an explosion and now cleanses, purifies, renews. It's a literal transformation of waste into resource. It's simple but profound alchemy. You're too sleepy now to think clearly. Fragmented images float through your consciousness. A snow-capped mountain, a deep blue lake, a glistening black beach, endless green fields, all images of places shaped by volcanoes, all places of serene beauty. And you let yourself sink into these images. Let them become the scenery of your dreams. Some volcanoes form permanent lava lakes. They don't erupt violently. They just maintain a pool of molten rock in their craters, constantly renewed by magma rising from below. These lakes bubble, convect, form crusts that break and reveal the incandescent glow beneath. It's hypnotic to watch. It's like looking into a fireplace, but on a giant scale. And just as a fireplace attracts people, makes them sit around, talk, relax, the lava lake attracts volcanologists who can spend hours simply observing, filming, studying the patterns of movement, the changes in temperature, the cycles of renewal. Mount Erebus in Antarctica has a permanent lava lake. It is the southernmost active volcano on the planet, guarding fire in a land of eternal ice. The juxtaposition is surreal. Penguins miles away, seals resting on floating ice platforms, and in the interior of the continent, a mountain that burns. Scientists maintain a research station nearby, studying not only the volcano, but also microorganisms that live in fumaroles around the crater, adapted to extreme temperatures, both heat and cold. And these organisms may offer clues about how life could exist on other planets. On Europa, Jupiter's moon covered by ice but with a liquid ocean underneath, heated by tidal forces similar to those that keep Erebus alive. The connection between volcanoes and life is deeper than just soil fertility. It's philosophical. It's existential. Without volcanism, without plate tectonics, Earth would be a dead world. There would be no carbon recycling between the atmosphere and the interior. There would be no nutrient renewal. Oceans would have evaporated or frozen permanently. The atmosphere would have been lost to space, and life, if it arose, would have quickly become extinct. Volcanoes are part of the planetary thermostat, part of the life support system. And realizing this, really understanding this, changes how you see a smoking mountain. It's not a threat. It's an ally. It's a guardian. You breathe so slowly now that you seem almost not to breathe. Your chest rises and falls gently, rhythmically, like a wave on the beach. And each exhale takes more tension away. Each inhale brings more peace. You are safe. You are at rest. And the volcanoes around the world also rest for the most part, silent, patient, waiting, not with sinister intent, but with geological patience. Waiting because that's what they do. They exist, they persist, and occasionally, very occasionally, they remind the world that they are there. The science of volcanoes, volcanology, is relatively young. For centuries, volcanoes were mysteries, attributed to gods, demons, supernatural forces. And then, gradually, observation replaced superstition. Measurements replaced myths. And today, volcanologists can predict many eruptions with enough advance notice for evacuations, for preparations, to minimize losses. Not all. Some eruptions still surprise, but the success rate is high, and lives are saved. Not because the volcano has been tamed, but because it has been understood. And there is an important lesson in this. Understanding is not control. It is informed respect. It is the ability to coexist safely because you know the patterns, the signs, the limits. Seismic monitors around active volcanoes detect minimal tremors. Satellites measure ground deformation with millimeter precision. Chemical sensors analyze gases emitted by fumaroles, detecting changes in the proportion of sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide. And all this data is integrated, analyzed, interpreted. And when worrying patterns emerge, when tremors increase in frequency, when the ground swells indicating magma accumulation below, when gases change composition suggesting that fresh magma is ascending, then alerts are issued. Communities are informed, evacuation plans are reviewed, and all this happens quietly, professionally, without panic. Because knowledge brings calm, because preparation brings confidence, and because, most of the time, the detected signs do not lead to immediate eruptions. They lead to periods of restlessness, adjustment, gradual release of pressure. The volcano takes a deep breath, settles down, and returns to rest. You breathe too, so slowly now that each breath seems to last a gentle eternity. And between one breath and another, there are spaces of perfect silence, where you are nothing but suspended consciousness, floating, weightless, worry-free, timeless. Human stories about volcanoes are numerous and varied. There is the myth of Vulcan, the Roman god of the forge, who worked under volcanoes, hammering metal, creating weapons for gods, impossible armor, magical objects. And the sound of his work echoed through the volcanic chimneys, manifesting as tremors, as underground rumblings. It's a myth, of course, but it captures an emotional truth. Something is working beneath the surface. Something is creating, transforming, forging. Not gods, but geological processes. But the feeling is similar. Admiration, respect, recognition of creative power. In Polynesian mythology, there are Heel, tales of Maui, the trickster hero, who fished islands from the ocean floor. And geologically, that's not so far from the truth. Underwater volcanoes really do fish islands from the depths, raising rock from the mantle until it breaks the surface of the water and becomes habitable land. The myth encodes real observation. The ancients saw islands emerging. They saw new land where before there was only ocean. And they created narratives to explain, to give meaning, to connect natural events with human stories of heroism, effort, creation. And you appreciate these stories. Not as substitutes for science, but as complements. Because science explains how, but stories explore why. Explore meaning. Explore the emotional relationship between humans and the natural world. Both are valuable. Both enrich the experience of being alive, of inhabiting a dynamic planet, of witnessing wonders that existed before you and will exist after. There are places in the world where you can walk between two tectonic plates. In Iceland, the Thingvellir Valley marks the boundary where the North American and Eurasian plates separate. It's a literal rift, growing a few centimeters a year, where you can touch both plates simultaneously. Extend your arms and have one hand in America, the other in Europe, symbolically. And tourists do this. They pose for photos, they smile. And maybe they feel something beyond amusement. Maybe they feel, even if vaguely, the magnitude of the moment. They are touching structures that define continents. They are in a place where the planet literally opens up, renews itself, recreates itself. And this tactile, physical experience of touching rock that is actively moving, even if too slowly to perceive in the moment, is transformative. You imagine being in that valley now. It's summer. The sun shines in a clear sky, but the breeze is cool because the latitude is high. Vegetation is low, mosses and grasses adapted to the harsh climate.
and you walk slowly through the rift, observing the walls of basaltic rock on each side, noting the layers, the strata that tell the story of successive eruptions over millennia. And you reach out, touch the cold, rough rock, and feel a connection. Not mystical necessarily, but real. You are touching the process that created oceans, that separated continents, that shaped the face of the planet on which all human beings who have ever existed lived their lives. It's humbling, it's inspiring, it's both simultaneously. Volcanoes teach about impermanence. Mountains that seem eternal are built eruption by eruption and can be destroyed in a single explosion. Islands emerge and, over millions of years, are eroded until they disappear completely. Craters fill with water and become lakes, then the lakes dry up and become plains, then the plains are covered by new eruptions. Nothing is permanent. Everything is in flux.
And that's a Buddhist lesson, a Stoic lesson, a lesson that many philosophies try to teach. But volcanoes don't just teach with words. They demonstrate with incessant action over eons. And yet, within this impermanence, there are patterns, there are cycles. Volcanoes erupt, rest, erupt again. Soil is created, plants grow, ash falls, new soil is created. It's constant renewal. It's death and rebirth simultaneous. And there's comfort in that, because it means that the end is never really the end. It's a transition. It's a metamorphosis into something new. You are so relaxed now that you no longer feel your body. Or rather, you feel it, but not as something separate. You are the chair or bed where you rest. You are the air you breathe. You are the ambient temperature that surrounds you.
Boundaries have dissolved, and in this state, you understand viscerally what words can only point to. Everything is connected. You and the planet and the cosmos, atom and star, breath and wind, heart and magma. Everything is movement. Everything is energy taking temporary forms, dancing, transforming, continuing. There are ice volcanoes on some moons of the outer solar system. They don't spew molten rock, but liquid water, ammonia, methane, which, in the extremely low temperatures of those distant worlds, behave like lava. These cryovolcanoes create alien landscapes, but they follow the same physical laws. Pressure builds up, material is expelled, the surface is renewed. The principles are universal. Only the materials change. And that's strangely comforting. Because it means that, wherever we go in the universe, we will find familiar processes, variations on known themes. We will never be completely lost, because physics is the same everywhere, and its mathematical beauty manifests itself in infinite but recognizable diversity. Enceladus, a moon of Saturn, has cryovolcanoes that launch jets of water vapor and ice particles into space. Some of these jets reach escape velocity and become part of Saturn's rings. The moon is literally feeding the rings. It is creating cosmic beauty through a volcanic process. And when space probes, they crossed these jets, detected not only water, but organic molecules, salts, indications that a liquid ocean exists beneath Enceladus's icy crust, and that this ocean may have conditions for life. All thanks to the heating generated by tidal forces, the same force that keeps volcanoes active on Io. Volcanism isn't just terrestrial, it's cosmic. It's one of the fundamental processes through which the universe creates complexity, diversity, and possibly life. You smile slightly, even though your facial muscles barely move. There's a serene joy in contemplating these connections, in realizing that volcanoes here on Earth are part of a much larger story that encompasses the entire solar system, the entire galaxy, the entire universe. You aren't isolated. Nothing is isolated. Everything is part of an intricate web of relationships, causes, and effects that extends through space and time, connecting the present moment with the Big Bang,
connecting your body with distant stars, connecting your consciousness with geological processes that operate on a scale of millions of years. The color of lava varies with temperature. Hotter lava glows yellowish white, almost blinding. As it cools, it goes through orange, then red, then dark red, almost brown, and finally, when it solidifies, it becomes black. But even black, it still retains heat for a long time. You could approach a newly solidified lava flow and feel the heat radiating. Feel your face redden, feel sweat begin to form, even if you are meters away.
And scientists wear special clothing, aluminized suits that reflect heat, to collect samples of still hot lava. They approach with special hammers, break pieces of the incandescent crust, collect fragments that will cool quickly in metal containers, preserving their structure for later study. It's dangerous work, but also deeply fascinating. Each sample tells a chemical story, reveals proportions of minerals, preserves bubbles of gas that can be analyzed to understand the composition of the deep magma. And you think about collecting experiences just as volcanologists collect samples. Each moment lived is a fragment of reality that can be examined, appreciated, learned. And moments of tranquility, like this one you are experiencing now, are especially valuable.
They are samples of peace that you can revisit in memory when life becomes hectic, when stress accumulates, when you need to remember that calm is possible, that serenity exists, that you can access it by breathing deeply and remembering dormant volcanoes, blue crater lakes, silent black beaches. There is poetry in volcanological terminology. Words like pyroclast, which literally means rock broken by fire, describe fragments launched during explosive eruptions. There's lava tube, tunnels formed when the surface of a lava flow solidifies while the interior is still flowing, eventually draining and leaving a winding cave, sometimes kilometers in length, where you can walk through a corridor created by a river of molten rock that passed there years or centuries ago.
There's volcanic bomb, blobs of lava launched in ballistic arcs that solidify in the air, assuming aerodynamic shapes, falling still hot and deforming upon impacting the ground. Each term captures a specific phenomenon, but also carries a poetic, evocative charge. You could spend an entire life studying volcanoes and never exhaust the wonders. Each volcano is unique. Each eruption is different. Each rock sample contains mineral surprises. And there are volcanoes that have never adequately studied, remote mountains in countries where resources are scarce, underwater volcanoes that have never been mapped, polar regions where access is extremely difficult. The field is far from complete, and there is beauty in that too. There are still discoveries waiting.
There are still unsolved mysteries. Science hasn't killed wonder. It has only refined it, focused it, made it more precise. Some artists work with volcanic materials. Sculptures carve basalt, creating abstract or figurative shapes that preserve the rough texture of the stone, that incorporate natural bubbles as design elements. Glassmakers experiment with obsidian, reheating it, molding it, creating objects that are both ancient and new, that are simultaneously the work of nature and human art. Ceramists mix volcanic ash into their clays, creating glazes with unique colors, unusual textures. And there's something profound in art that incorporates a volcano. It's a collaboration between human and planet.
It's a recognition that creativity is not only human, but universal, manifesting itself in eruptions, in crystallizations, in cooling patterns, and also in hands that shape, in minds that imagine, in hearts that are moved. You are so deeply relaxed that words begin to lose precise meaning. They become pleasant sounds, gentle rhythms. Waves of sensation washing over your consciousness without demanding analysis, without requiring response. And you allow yourself to be swayed by them, Let them transport you to regions of awareness where verbal thought isn't needed, where experience is direct, immediate, pre-linguistic. There are temples built on the slopes of volcanoes, sanctuaries erected in craters, altars of volcanic stone where generations of humans have deposited offerings, murmured prayers, sought connection with something greater than themselves. And regardless of specific religious beliefs, there's something moving about these places because they demonstrate a universal human recognition that certain locations, certain geological formations, certain natural phenomena evoke feelings of sacredness, of mystery, of reverence. The volcano is not God, but it points to something beyond the mundane. It interrupts the ordinary. It reminds you that there are forces that transcend human control, that predate civilization, that will continue after the last city has become ruins. You feel like you're dissolving gently, not in a frightening way, but like sugar dissolving in water, spreading, mixing, becoming part of something larger. Your individual consciousness remains, but its edges become less defined, and you float in this intermediate state, neither fully awake nor fully asleep, in a place that yogis would call a deep meditative state, that neuroscientists would call theta brainwaves, that you simply experience as absolute peace. The colors of the sunsets you've witnessed in your life were influenced, in part, by volcanic particles in the atmosphere. Even small eruptions in remote parts of the world launch aerosols that circulate globally, remaining suspended for months or years, scattering sunlight in ways that intensify oranges and reds. You never knew you were thinking a volcano when you paused to admire a sky painted in impossible colors. But you were, indirectly, unconsciously. The volcano beautified your world without asking for credit. And how many other things in your life are unrecognized gifts from natural processes that you rarely consider? The water you drink has been purified cyclically through evaporation and rain fed by solar heat. The oxygen you breathe was produced by plants that descend from organisms that evolved thanks to conditions created by primordial volcanoes. The minerals in your bones, the iron in your blood, came from stars that exploded billions of years before the sun existed, scattering heavy elements that became incorporated into a dust cloud that eventually condensed into a solar system, into Earth, into you. You are a product of cosmic, geological, biological processes that have unfolded over eons. And that perspective, instead of making you insignificant, makes every moment of consciousness miraculous. There are botanical gardens specializing in plants that thrive in volcanic soils, collections of giant ferns, flowering shrubs, rare trees that grow specifically in recent ash. And visitors walk through these gardens, admire the exuberance, photograph flowers of vibrant colors, and learn, through discrete informative plaques, about the symbiotic relationship between vegetation and volcanism. The garden is a living lesson. It's a tangible demonstration that death feeds life, that destruction creates opportunity, that nature doesn't operate in moral categories of good or bad, but in cycles of transformation. You imagine walking through such a garden now. It's late, the light is turning golden, shadows lengthen, birds begin their evening songs, and you walk slowly, observing each plant, each flower, each fern unfurling new fronds, and you feel gratitude, not directed at anything specific, just a general, diffuse gratitude for existence, for beauty, for the intricate complexity of a world where volcanoes and orchids coexist, where molten rock becomes soil that nourishes delicate petals. Some scientists study volcanoes not only to prevent disasters, but to understand the origin of life. Because hydrothermal vents, heated by volcanism, offer concentrated energy, chemical gradients, environments where complex reactions can occur.
And there's a growing hypothesis that life may have originated not in a warm pond illuminated by the sun, as Darwin speculated, but in dark oceanic depths around volcanic hydrothermal vents, where the chemistry of the volcano provided raw materials and energy for the first organic molecules to form, to organize, eventually to become self-replicating, alive. If true, then you not only owe your atmosphere to volcanoes, not only the fertility of the soil, but your very existence. You are, in the most literal sense possible, a child of the volcano. And that idea, instead of being cold or reductive, is deeply moving, because it means that you carry within you the legacy of processes that began when Anya didn't have a name yet, when oceans were young, when life was just a chemical possibility waiting for the right conditions. You are a continuation of an experiment that began billions of years ago. And the fact that you can now contemplate your own origin, can understand the processes that created you, can feel awe and gratitude, is perhaps the most extraordinary development of all. You breathe, in, out, so slowly that the border between breaths becomes indistinct. And with each cycle, you feel something releasing. You don't know exactly what. Maybe worries you were carrying, maybe chronic muscle tensions, maybe just excess thought, the constant mental chatter that characterizes modern consciousness. Whatever it is, it's leaving, and in its place, something simpler enters: peace, acceptance, presence. Volcanoes don't rush. They take thousands of years to build themselves. They can sleep for centuries between eruptions. When they erupt, they do so in their own time, following a logic of pressure and resistance that cannot be hurried or delayed by human will. And there's a profound lesson in that for an age of immediacy, of instant gratification, of chronic impatience. Some things simply take the time they take, and trying to rush them doesn't speed them up. It only generates frustration. Better to accept the natural rhythm, breathe, wait with geological patience. And you practice that patience now. You're not waiting for anything specific. You're not trying to achieve a special state. You're just being, existing. Allowing time to pass at its own speed. Letting thoughts come and go like clouds crossing the sky. Letting sensations float through your body without clinging to them or resisting. There are volcanoes that form islands in archipelagos, chains of islands aligned like beads on a necklace, each marking a point where a tectonic plate passed over a hotspot, a stationary source of magma in the deep mantle. Hawaii is a perfect example. The main island, the Big Island, is still over the hotspot and has active volcanoes. The islands to the northwest are progressively older, more eroded, smaller, as the tectonic plate has carried them away from the source of magma. Eventually, they will sink completely, becoming seamounts, underwater mountains. And in the distant future, a new volcano will emerge southeast of the Big Island, continuing the chain, adding a new pearl to the geological necklace. It's a continuous process, its creation without end. And you think about your own life as a similar chain, moments that were created, lived, and now belong to the past, but that still exist in you as memories, as experiences that shaped who you are. And the present moment, this now that you inhabit, is the current island, the place where life is most active, most warm, most intense. And there will be future moments, islands not yet formed, experiences not yet lived, and all will be part of the same chain, the same continuous journey through time. And that perspective brings comfort. Because even when specific moments pass, even when people leave, even when chapters end, the chain continues, the journey goes on. You are almost asleep now. Consciousness flickers like a candle flame in a room without drafts. Small fluctuations, but fundamentally stable, fundamentally serene. And you allow it. You don't fight sleep. You don't try to force yourself to stay awake. If sleep comes, it comes. If not, that's okay too. You are comfortable in both states, on the threshold between them, in this place that is not exactly wakefulness, nor exactly dream, but something precious between the two. The oldest volcanic rocks on Earth are over 3 billion years old.
They witnessed the beginning of multicellular life, the emergence of the first continents, the oxygenation of the atmosphere, ice ages that covered the entire planet, asteroid impacts that shaped the fate of entire species. They are archives, libraries written in crystals and minerals, waiting to be read by those with the knowledge to decipher their geological language. And when scientists study these ancient rocks, when they date their minerals, when they analyze isotopes, they are not just doing abstract science. They are reconstructing the history of the ancestral home of all terrestrial life. They are understanding the conditions that made your own existence possible. And you, lying or sitting comfortably, are part of that history, not just passively, but actively. Because you are aware of it. You can contemplate it. You can appreciate it. And consciousness, wherever it exists in the universe, is an extraordinary phenomenon. It is matter organized in such a complex way that it can reflect on itself, on its origins, on its destiny. It is the universe awakening to itself. And the fact that this has happened here, on Earth, on a planet partially shaped by volcanoes, is part of the larger narrative of how complexity arises from simplicity, how order emerges from chaos, how beauty blossoms from processes. Blind but creative physical souls. You smile again. Or maybe you just imagine you smile. Your facial muscles may not be moving, but something inside you is smiling, a feeling of contentment so deep that it doesn't need external expression. It is enough to feel. It is enough to know that at this moment, everything is right. You are alive. The planet is alive. The sun will continue to shine for billions of years. Volcanoes will continue their slow work of renewing the planetary surface. Life will continue to adapt, evolve, exploring new possibilities. And you have the privilege of witnessing a small portion of this great story. And that's enough. It is more than enough. It's a miracle. The sound of hot springs, when you are close enough, is soft and constant. Bubbling of hot water rising through cracks in the rock, hissing of escaping steam. Occasional crack when minerals deposit and fracture under thermal stress. It is not a loud or disturbing noise. It is natural ambient music, a geological composition that never repeats exactly, but maintains a recognizable character. People who live near these springs report that the sounds become so familiar that they become part of the silence, noticed only when they cease temporarily. Like the breathing of a loved one sleeping beside you. You don't listen consciously, but its absence would wake you instantly. You listen now with your inner ear to this imaginary bubbling, and it synchronizes with your own breathing, creates a shared rhythm. Inhale, bubbles rise. Exhale, steam escapes. You and the hot spring are breathing together. There is no separation. Just two aspects of the same living planet, of the same continuous process of energy flowing, transforming, manifesting in infinitely varied forms. There are caves formed by lava where the ceiling has collapsed in some places, creating openings through which sunlight penetrates. And where light touches the cave floor, plants grow, mosses, ferns, even small trees. And explorers who walk through these caves experience something magical, stretches of absolute darkness alternating with illuminated oases of vibrant green. It's like crossing different worlds, an underworld of black rock, a garden suspended in time, underworld again.
It is a physical, but also a metaphorical journey. Descent, illumination, return. Eternal cycle of loss and discovery, death and rebirth.
And your own journey through life follows a similar pattern. There are dark periods when you walk through stretches with no apparent light, trusting in uncertain steps, groping in the unknown. And then, unexpectedly, clarity arises, insight, understanding, a moment of beauty that illuminates everything around. And then darkness returns, but you continue, because now you know that light exists, that oases are hidden along the way, that it is worth continuing to explore. The volcano carved this cave over eras. Your life carves you in the same way, slowly, patiently, creating internal spaces, chambers of experience, tunnels of growth. Fluorescent minerals are found in some volcanic rocks. Under ultraviolet light, stones that look ordinary during the day glow in impossible neon colors.
Lime green, shocking pink, electric orange. It is as if the rock has a secret life that is only revealed under special conditions. And there is a beautiful metaphor here. Everyone carries depths that are not immediately visible. Everyone has aspects that only shine when the right circumstances illuminate them. The right encounter, the right moment, the right question. And then something that was always there, but hidden, reveals itself in all its surprising luminosity. You wonder, drowsily, which aspects of yourself you have not yet revealed. What capacities are sleeping like a dormant volcano, waiting for the appropriate conditions to awaken? What fluorescent colors exist in you, invisible under the common light of daily routine, but ready to shine if you find your personal ultraviolet light? And the question doesn't generate anxiety or pressure. It generates gentle curiosity, patient expectation. There is time. There is always time. You don't need to force anything. You can simply live, explore, remain open. And when the time is right, the revelation will come naturally, like magma that finally reaches the surface after a silent journey through miles of rock. There are people who dedicate their entire lives to studying a single volcano, decades of observation, measurement, analysis. And when you ask why, they explain that each volcano is a universe in itself. It has a unique personality, a distinct history. Characteristic behavior. Knowing one volcano deeply is better than knowing hundreds superficially. It's like true friendship versus hundreds of casual acquaintances. Depth brings intimacy, understanding, respect that cannot be achieved by hasty observation. And you apply this wisdom to your own life. Maybe it's better to know a few people, a few places, a few things deeply, the activities, than to spread thinly over vast territory. Perhaps there is more satisfaction in diving deep than in surfing surfaces. Perhaps quality of attention matters more than quantity of experiences. The volcano doesn't care if it's famous or obscure. It doesn't compete for rankings of height or spectacular eruptions. It simply exists, does its geological work, offers what it has to offer. And that is enough. It's more than enough. The clouds that form over active volcanoes sometimes take on strange and beautiful shapes. Lenticular clouds, which look like stacked disks or spaceships, form when moist air is forced to rise rapidly over a mountain, cools, condenses, and then descends on the other side. If conditions are perfect, a series of these clouds can form, suspended at different altitudes, appearing completely stationary, even though winds are blowing through them. It's an optical illusion. The clouds are constantly forming on the windward side and dissolving on the leeward side, but the shape remains fixed, like a standing wave in a river flowing over a submerged stone. You contemplate this image, a form that remains while substance flows through it. And you realize that it's true for many things. Your body is a form that persists while atoms flow through it. Cells are constantly replaced. The water that makes up you today will be eliminated and replaced in days. And still, you recognize yourself in the mirror. The form persists, identity remains. Even though matter is transient, it's a comforting paradox. You are a process, not a thing, a verb, not a noun. And processes don't die, they just transform, continue in different configurations. There is simple pleasure in watching lava cool. Photographers spend entire nights filming the process in time-lapse. And when watched accelerated, it looks like a dance. Bright red gradually darkening, crust forming, cracking, revealing the glow beneath, closing again. Fractal patterns emerging spontaneously. Each frame is an abstract composition of impossible colors. It's natural, generative art. And the fact that it happens without an audience, without aesthetic intention, without purpose beyond physics and chemistry, doesn't diminish its beauty. Perhaps it increases it, because it demonstrates that beauty is not a human property. It is not imposed by consciousness. It is emergent. It is intrinsic. It is the universe being beautiful simply because natural processes, following natural laws, produce patterns that conscious minds, when they eventually evolve, recognize as aesthetically profound. You are floating now in a state that yogis would call yoga nidra, yogic sleep. You are not totally unconscious, but you are also not thinking discursively. You are in a mode of pure reception. Images and sensations flow through you without being analyzed, categorized, judged, just experienced. And there is freedom in that. Freedom from the burden of constant interpretation. You can simply be a silent witness to your own consciousness. Certain volcanoes emit musical sounds during eruptions, not metaphorically, literally. Researchers have recorded pure, almost sinusoidal tones emanating from craters during certain eruptive phases. The frequencies correspond to resonances in magmatic chambers, tubes of gas acting like gigantic organs. And when processed digitally, these sounds are surprisingly harmonious. Some artists incorporate recordings of volcanoes into musical compositions. Others simply reproduce them without modification, arguing that they are complete music in themselves. And listeners report profound sensations, not just auditory, but visceral, as if the sounds were vibrating something deep within them. Perhaps because low frequencies resonate with bodily rhythms. Perhaps because there is an unconscious recognition that these sounds come from a primordial place, from the geological womb where the planet is still birthing itself. You listen inwardly to these imaginary frequencies, a low, constant tone that vibrates in your chest. And it is comforting, like a mother's humming calming a child, like a mantra repeated in meditation. It doesn't have to mean anything, it just has to be. And being, it brings peace. There are libraries of volcanic rock samples in institutions around the world. Shelves and shelves of labeled fragments, each with date, location, composition. And researchers can request samples, study them, add their data to global databases. It's a collective effort. No individual scientist could collect and analyze everything, but working together, sharing information, building on the work of previous generations, understanding grows, slowly, incrementally, like a volcano building a mountain layer by layer. And there is beauty in collective enterprise, in recognizing that progress doesn't come from solitary geniuses, but from patient communities of dedicated people, each contributing a small but valuable fragment to a larger mosaic of conocimiento. And your life is collaborative too. You are the product of countless contributions, genes inherited from ancestors, language learned from community, ideas absorbed from books, conversations, experiences. You are not a solitary creation. You are a node in a vast network of connections, and the more you recognize this, the more gratitude you feel.
Gratitude to all who came before, who fought, learned, created, so that you could exist, so that you could have this moment of quiet awareness. Rainwater that falls on a volcano percolates through porous layers of rock, descends slowly, heats up as it approaches sources of deep heat, dissolves minerals, and eventually emerges as a thermal spring, hot and rich in dissolved substances. This journey can take years, decades. The water you drink from a thermal spring today may have fallen as rain when you were still a child, or before you were born. And there is poetry in drinking water so traveled, so transformed. You are savoring liquid time, drinking geological history. And the minerals in this water, sulfur, iron, silicon, were part of deep rocks, and now will be part of you, incorporated into your tissues, temporarily becoming you before being eventually excreted and returning to the cycle. Everything is borrowed. Carbon atoms in your body have been in plants, animals, rocks, atmosphere. They have circulated through the biosphere countless times, and after you, they will circulate again. Nothing is truly yours. You are a temporary curator, and there is peace in letting go of possessive attachment. In recognizing that everything flows, that possession is an illusion, that life is a process of receiving, holding lightly, and releasing. Like breathing. In, pause. Out, in again. Endless cycle. You breathe now with a renewed awareness that the air that enters has been breathed by countless other beings. It contains molecules that pass through the lungs of people who lived centuries ago. It contains oxygen produced by trees on distant continents. It contains traces of volcanic aerosols from ancient eruptions. And you accept this gift, use it, and return it, enriched with carbon dioxide that trees will transform back into oxygen. You are part of a planetary breath, cosmic inspiration and exhalation. And your small individual breath is synchronized with a larger breath. There is no separation, just participation. The first geological maps that included volcanoes were made only a few centuries ago. Before that, volcanoes were marked on maps simply as mountains, sometimes with the notation that they smoked or were dangerous, but without any real understanding of their nature. And the transition from ignorance to knowledge was gradual. Careful observers noticed patterns. Volcanoes tended to occur in certain regions. Eruptions were preceded by tremors. Volcanic rocks had specific compositions. And slowly a theory emerged. Tectonic plates, magma, mantle convection, and suddenly volcanoes made sense. They were not whims of gods or unexplained anomalies. They were natural manifestations of deep but understandable processes. And there is comfort in understanding, not because it eliminates mystery, but because it frames mystery in context. You may not know exactly when a specific volcano will erupt, but you know why volcanoes erupt in general. You may not predict every detail of your own life, but you understand the general principles of how choices lead to consequences, how habits shape character, how presence cultivates peace. Understanding offers a map. It doesn't tell you where to go, but it shows you the terrain. And with a map, you can navigate with more confidence, knowing that getting lost is not a catastrophe, just part of exploration. There are flowers that grow exclusively in young volcanic soils. They are pioneers, specialized in colonizing hostile environments where other plants would fail. Their seeds can remain dormant for years, waiting for an eruption to create new territory. And when conditions are finally right, they germinate quickly, grow aggressively, and bloom abundantly. They don't live long, a few decades at most. But in that time, they transform the landscape. Their roots break rock, their decomposing bodies enrich the soil, and they pave the way for the species that will come later, for the forests that will eventually cover what is now a field of ashes. You think about your own contributions.
Maybe you are also a pioneer in some sense. Maybe your struggles, your attempts, your partial successes are preparing the ground for others. Maybe you won't see the final result. Maybe the forests that your seeds will help to create will grow after you are gone. But your actions matter anyway. Every small act of kindness enriches the social soil. Every moment of courage breaks the rock of resistance. Every conscious choice plants a seed that can sprout in ways you will never imagine. And there is deep meaning in that. You don't need to accomplish great visible deeds. You just need to live authentically, contribute honestly, trust that your existence has value, even if you never see all the fruits. The stars you see at night, if you look at the sky in a dark place, include some that no longer exist. Their light traveled so long to reach your eyes that the stars themselves have already faded. You are seeing the past. You always are. Even the sun you see is as it was 8 minutes ago, the time it takes for light to cross the distance between the sun and the earth. And volcanoes, on a different scale, are also messengers from the past. Each eruption brings material from the depths, brings information about conditions that exist kilometers below, brings fragments of geological history to the surface. Studying a volcano is seeing the hidden interior of the planet. It's time travel of a different kind. And you also carry the past within you, memories encoded in neural connections, traumas and joys that have shaped automatic responses, patterns learned in childhood that still influence adult behavior. You are stratified like volcanic rock, layer upon layer of sedimented experiences. And sometimes internal eruptions bring deep material to the surface. Old emotions emerge unexpectedly. Forgotten memories resurface. And this can be disturbing or liberating, depending on how you receive it. If you resist, judge, try to suppress, you create pressure that eventually explodes destructively. If you accept, observe curiously, allow conscious expression, transformation happens smoothly. The past is processed, integrated, released, and you become more complete, more unified, more at peace. You are so relaxed now that you have lost the sense of where your body ends and the environment begins. The temperature of your skin seems the same as the temperature of the air. There is no discomfort. There is no need to adjust your position. You are perfectly balanced, like water in a glass that has stopped swaying, absolutely still, reflecting everything without distortion. Certain underwater volcanoes create pillars of rock called black smokers or white smokers, depending on the minerals they deposit. And around these pillars, life proliferates. But not just life, community, a complete ecosystem where each organism depends on others, where energy flows are recycled efficiently, where one's waste is another's food. It's a model of sustainability, and humans are only beginning to learn from these deep communities, how to create closed systems where recycling is perfect, how to live in extreme environments, how to cooperate instead of compete. The lessons are there, written in the arrangement of life around a hydrothermal vent. We just need to observe with enough attention, with enough humility to learn from organisms that have existed for millions of years in sustainable equilibrium. And your own life can be a microcosm of sustainability. You can recycle emotional energy, transform negative experiences into learning, give back to the world what you have received in an altered but valuable form. You can create symbiotic relationships where everyone benefits. You can stop seeing resources as finite and start seeing them as circulating. The money you spend eventually returns. The love you give creates more love. The knowledge you share multiplies. Generosity creates abundance. And this is not wishful thinking. It is a recognition that open systems, where energy and matter flow, are richer, more resilient, more alive than closed systems that try to accumulate and hoard.
There are volcanoes that have never been seen erupting by humans, but that we know are active because the ground around them is hot, because gases are emitted, because micro-earthquakes are detected. They are like hearts beating silently, doing vital work without calling attention. And there is something admirable in that, doing what is necessary without fanfare, contributing without demanding recognition, existing fully even when no one is watching. And you can aspire to that.